Now, there are a lot of wonderful moms here today, no doubt. Moms in traditional families, moms in special circumstances, single moms, step-in moms, and you deserve all the honor that we can give to you today. You deserve breakfast in bed, lunch in bed, if you want a pendant, flowers, whatever it is that you want today. You deserve all of it. But I got to tell you, I went to the store and went shopping for a Mother's Day card this week. Oh my gosh, I was a little overwhelmed. Like, I started picking up these cards and reading these cards, and every card I picked up and I read, I thought, thank God I'm a dad. I don't know that I could live up to this standard. I don't know that I could get all of this done. I don't know that I have it in me. Like, there are these cards, and we talk about our moms sometimes like they're perfect. And look, you might fight me and say my mom is perfect. Well, I would say the same thing. My mom is as close to perfect as possible, but she's not. And I can say that because she's here. It won't make it awkward at all. I've told her before. There's this culture of holding moms up to this standard that no human can live to. And so moms, we're sorry if we've set the bar so high that you can't reach it. But moms, we're so glad that you made the effort. We're so glad that you tried to live to that standard that some people put on you, that some different ways about our culture seem to put on you. We're glad for everything that you did. But I was trying to think, like if I was going to give my mom like the most honest card on this Mother's Day, like what would it say? Like, congrats, we both lived. I mean, or maybe I was thinking about like what would be a little bit more poetic is like the words from Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. I can say that word. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. And we had everything before us, and we had nothing before us. And maybe those words might resonate, because the reality is, all of us are human. All of us struggle. All of us have moments where we feel like it's going perfectly. All of us have moments where we feel like we've got it all together. And all of us have moments where we don't. All of our mothers are both incredible and trying at the same time. And the one thing that we have all in common today is that we all have a mother. And perhaps she was all that and more, and maybe she wasn't. Because just like us, she's human. Just like us, she struggled. Just like us, she had difficulties that we don't even know how to put words on. And now I was thinking about examples of mothers in the scriptures, which, like, moms, if you want to feel better about your motherhood, if you want to feel better about the way you've raised your kids, just start reading about moms in the scriptures. It's not a wonderful list. It's not incredible. It's not amazing. There aren't these moms that are like, oh, yes, they got it all right. I mean, we're going to look at the story of Sarah here in just a moment. The wife of Abraham, she kind of scoffs at God after being involved in a couple of different lies and just all sorts of stuff going on. And she bears a son, and her son's wife has two children, and their mother, Isaac's wife, helps to deceive Isaac, helps one of her sons, her favorite son. And if that's not bad enough, maybe you prefer in 2 Kings chapter 6, where two moms make a deal that they would take turns eating each other's sons, like they were out of food. And so, like, if you haven't done that, look, you're better than the moms in the Bible. Okay, so we're already doing better today. And you know, maybe we might think, oh, what about like Mary, mother of Jesus? You mean the one who left Jesus behind and traveled a whole day without realizing that she had forgotten God's only son? Now, I know we've all looked around and had that panic moment where we're like, where's my kids? But that's a different ball game. It's a different ball game. What I love about the scriptures is that they tell us our story of humanity and God's interaction with all of us in the midst of it. And so here on this Mother's Day, let's just acknowledge that we're all humans, that we're all people, and that we can celebrate things, that we can celebrate certain aspects of our moms and the mothers in our lives, the people who have invested in us, while acknowledging that it's not always perfect. But God is still good, and God's love is still shown in and through that relationship. So let's jump into the scriptures here in Genesis chapter 21. I want to share with you a little bit out of this, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory, if that's okay. In Genesis chapter 21, it says this: the Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. That's incredibly important. The Lord did for Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. I think a lot of us grow up with a lot of trust issues, and we take our trust issues and we put them on God. And when we struggle to trust God, we struggle to trust anyone else. And when we struggle to trust anyone else, we struggle to celebrate in moments like this. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to his son, whom Sarah had borne him. And Abraham circumcised him when it was the 8th day, as God has commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And now Sarah said this: God has brought laughter for me, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she said, who would have ever said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse a child? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. I like that Sarah says that she bore Abraham a son in his old age. She doesn't mention her age because all women are 29. Don't guess at their age. Never, ever, 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 ever. Just never, ever guess at their age. It's okay. So the story here is this incredible promise of God that they would be the parents of nations. And for years and years and years, they had not had a child. And then late in life, really late in life, Sarah finds out that she's pregnant. Now, if we jump back a couple of chapters, God had already showed up to Abraham once and said to Abraham, Abraham, you're going to bear a son. And Abraham fell on his face laughing at what God had said to him because he knew he was old. He knew that didn't seem like a very good possibility. And then a chapter later, in chapter 18, we get this whole story about these visitors who show up to Abraham and Sarah, and they provide hospitality, and they care for them, and they invite them in, and they make a meal for them, and they have a great time together. And at the end of it, God shows up, and God says, Abraham, you and Sarah are going to have a child. And Sarah laughs out loud. Sarah laughs out loud. LOL. Moms, that does not mean like it means laugh out loud. It does not mean lots of love, okay? So like a friend of mine, he told this story one time of his mom texting him and saying, bad news, grandpa died, LOL. And he wrote back and said, Mom, that's really cold. And she said, what do you mean? He said, you're laughing about grandpa dying? And she's like, no, lots of love. And he's like, that's not what that means. To which she responded, I have to call your aunts and uncles. She laughs at God. She laughs at this thing that God says, this promise that God makes. which I think is an incredible thing to, like, just to be so frustrated. Just to be in a place where God makes a promise and you scoff at him a little bit. Are you kidding me, God? Are you kidding me right now? To laugh at God. Now, I mean, you got to feel for Sarah in this moment, because we've all kind of been in that place. We've all been a little frustrated with our circumstances. We've all been in a place where we look around and we go, this isn't the way that it should be. And if you make another promise, or you say another thing, or you expect something else out of me, like, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to laugh or cry. That's the only two options I have. And Sarah laughs at God's promise. Sarah laughs at the idea that in her age she could bear a child. What I love about the story is that, like, God, like, overhears her and is like, Sarah, why are you laughing? And she's like, I didn't laugh. God's like, yes, you did. And that's how the story ends, with God going, yes, you did laugh. Like, God's really involved in her business because she is his business. Right? Any of you ever told your mom that? Mom, stay out of my business. You are my business. God says the same thing to Sarah, but what he says is so incredible. What he says is a question in verse 14 of chapter 18. God asks this question: is anything too difficult for God? Is anything too difficult for God? Now, Sarah's experience of life to that point had made her a little bit bitter, had made her a little bit angry, had made her a little bit frustrated. She doesn't appreciate what God is saying in this moment, and she laughs at the very idea of God doing something in her life. She scoffs at this idea. God asks this question: is anything too difficult for God? Now, some of you who have children have tried to wrestle like a 2-year-old down to nap time, and somehow they have like extra arms and legs that you didn't account for, and trying to get them down, you say, like, that's pretty difficult. Or maybe some of you grew up in a house where things were a little unsteady. And as you think about the way that you experience life, there's heartbreak and there's hurt. And you're not sure if you can get through that or over that. And you walked into this place today with all sorts of feelings and worries and concerns about what it might be like to celebrate Mother's Day. Is anything too difficult for God? Is any broken relationship too difficult for God to heal? Maybe you walked in this morning, moms, and you're thinking about that wayward child, the one that you're just not sure what to do with, the one that you've exhausted all your effort on. And you're wondering, will anything ever change their life? Is anything too difficult for God? Now, we get an explanation as to why Sarah lies to God, why Sarah's like, no, I didn't laugh. It's because she's scared, because she has fear. We might know that nothing is too difficult for God, but we might still be afraid. We might still be afraid because we've experienced human relationships and we know that people let us down. And so we take those expectations and we put them on God, and we assume that God will let us down as well. And if we trust God, that God is good and that nothing is too difficult for God, that no hurt, no heartache, no pain, no struggle is too much for God to heal. If we trust that nothing is too difficult for God, we're worried that we might end up let down. if we put our trust in God, we find that there are no circumstances, there are no struggles, there are no hurts, there are no pains that are too much for God to walk in with us, to walk beside us in. And when we laugh at God in our disbelief, we laugh out of our bitterness. But God fulfills God's promise. The Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said. And the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. God showed up in the way that God said God would. And this, I think, is why Sarah laughs. Why Sarah rejoices. Why Sarah is able in that moment to say that God is good. Because God can be trusted. No matter the difficulty, no matter the struggle, no matter what's going on in your life, that we can trust that God is good and that nothing is too difficult for God. She laughs, she celebrates, she rejoices. And now, look, if you're 90 years old and you find out that you're having a baby, things have not gone according to plan. Right? I can't imagine that there wasn't some concern. I can't imagine that there wasn't some consternation. I can't imagine that there wasn't some struggle. I can't imagine that she was like, I'm not sure what to do in this moment. I don't know that I have the energy for this. I don't know how long I'll be around for this kid. I don't know all of these things, and all of these things are concerning to me. But she laughs and rejoices because she knows that God can be trusted. She has joy in this moment, and I love what happens that they not only does she laugh, but the child's name is Isaac, which in Hebrew literally means he laughs. That every time she said this kid's name, she was reminded of God's goodness and the joy of trusting God with everything she had. Can you imagine having a child named He Laughs? Like, can you, just yelling at that kid? He laughs, get over here. By the time you got over there, you'd be laughing too. That this constant reminder of the joy that comes from trusting God with everything allowed her to celebrate. And I got to be honest, in parenting, like I said, there's really only two choices sometimes. You can either laugh or cry, and sometimes you do both at the same time. He laughs. She rejoices. She celebrates, and she invites others to celebrate with her. Everyone who hears this will laugh along with me, will rejoice along with me, will celebrate with me, will smile with me, because God is good. And nothing is too difficult for God. Now, Sarah had lived in both places. She had lived in this place where she laughed out of bitterness and hurt. She also lived in this place where she laughed out of trust and fulfillment. And I think most of us have a choice to live in those two places every day. Because if we want to be honest, today is a day of rejoicing and celebrating and remembering and recalling thankfulness. But it's a choice to rejoice. Like finding joy in our lives is really a choice. It's turning our attention to the goodness of God in our lives no matter the circumstances. Philippians chapter 4, Paul tells us the same thing. Paul is writing to the Philippians from a prison cell, and he says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I will say, rejoice. We can't find joy in our circumstances. We can find joy in God, who is unchanged and unchanging. Katie Davis Majors, who adopted 15 Ugandan kids as a teenager, wrote a book called Daring to Hope, and in it she said that we can rejoice not in what's going on around us or within us, but because God is our strength, and He will continue to be. Because there's nothing that's too difficult for God. Nehemiah chapter 8 says the same thing. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Proverbs 31, which sometimes, again, sets the standard for women, which is pretty lofty. My favorite part of that is my daughter's favorite part of that. 31:25, it says, she laughs without fear of the future. You laugh without fear of the future. You can rejoice in the moment because you know God is trustworthy, and there is nothing that is too difficult for God. There is no relationship, nothing going on that God cannot handle and walk with you through. And sometimes we get to invite others along with us. Sometimes we get to do what Sarah did and invite others to rejoice and to laugh and to celebrate along with us. Laughter and celebration forms bonds. It can't be broken. When I was doing student ministry, I used to tell all of our adult leaders that in order for these kids to take you seriously, you can't take yourself too seriously. You have to be able to laugh and celebrate and rejoice in the small things and the big things and the difficult things and the things that don't seem like they're that big of a deal. Joy comes out of trust, trusting that God is who God says He is. That there is nothing too difficult for God. So today, if you walked into this place struggling to find joy, maybe it's time to do what Sarah got to do, to name your joy. He laughs. He celebrates. He rejoices. And for each of us, we can find something to rejoice in today. We can find something to celebrate today. We can find something to trust God in today. Because nothing is too difficult for God. And joy can be our strength, even on those long nights, those sleepless moments, those expensive bills, those difficult relationships. The joy of the Lord is our strength.